Welcome to Redacted Frequencies. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Echo. And today we're diving into something that sounds like a pulp spy novel, but it's terrifyingly real.
It really is. We're talking about the CIA, mind control, LSD, and a secret government program that went so far off the rails, it's hard to believe it even happened. This is the story of Project MK Ultra.
And fair warning, folks, the title of this episode is The CIA's Mind Control Experiments Were Worse Than You Think, and we're not kidding. This one gets dark.
Dark is an understatement, Echo. We are talking about a story with deep psychological horror, a blatant disregard for human rights, and a level of paranoia that is almost hard to comprehend today. This isn't just a story about a rogue agency. It's about the moral compromises made in the name of national security.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the sensational aspects, the LSD, the spies. It's about how an institution created to protect a nation turned its own citizens into lab rats. The sheer scale of it is staggering.
And we're not just talking about a few rogue agents in a basement. This was a sprawling, top-down effort with a budget that, in today's money, would be in the tens of millions. It involved dozens of institutions, from prestigious universities to federal prisons, all participating in a coordinated effort to unlock the secrets of the human mind by any means necessary. So, to really get it, you have to go back to the early 1950s. The Cold War is in full swing. America is gripped by this intense paranoia about the Soviet Union and China.
The paranoia was palpable. School children were doing duck and cover drills under their desks. People were building fallout shelters in their backyards. There was a genuine, pervasive fear that the American way of life was under imminent threat from an enemy that was both ideologically and technologically sophisticated. The government felt it was falling behind in a new kind of war. A war for the mind. Right, the whole Red Scare thing. But it went deeper than just communism as an ideology. They were specifically terrified of, brainwashing.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. The idea that you could capture a soldier and through a combination of drugs and psychological torture, turn them into a walking puppet for the enemy. The CIA saw the reports from Korea and didn't just see it as a possibility, they saw it as a reality they had to catch up with. They believed the Soviets were masters of a dark psychological art.
Exactly. After the Korean War, some American POWs came home and gave these bizarre, false confessions. And the CIA, they panicked. They thought the communists had cracked the code to the human mind. That they could just, erase a person and write a new one.
So, in their minds, the threat was existential. If the enemy could create a Manchurian candidate, a brainwashed assassin, or a spy who didn't even know they were a spy, then American democracy was vulnerable from within. That's the level of fear we're talking about.
Which is a terrifying thought. So their response was, we need to figure out how to do that too?
It's the classic fight fire with fire justification, but taken to a terrifying extreme. The logic was, if our enemies are willing to cross these moral lines, then we have to be willing to cross them too and go even further to protect ourselves. It's a dangerous and seductive idea, and it's what allowed a program like MK Ultra to exist.
Pretty much. In 1953, the big boss of the CIA, Allen Dulles, gives the green light to a new project, codename MK Ultra. He puts this chemist, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, in charge and basically gives him a blank check. And Gottlieb was the perfect man for the job in the CIA's eyes. He was a brilliant chemist, but he also had this messianic zeal. He truly believed that controlling the human mind was the next frontier in warfare. And he pursued that goal with an almost religious fervor, unburdened by conventional morality. He was a true believer. A blank check to do what?
The official mission was to develop a capability in the covert use of biological and chemical materials. But that's just bureaucratic jargon for a license to do whatever they wanted. The program was designed to be a black box. No oversight, no accountability. Just results.
Everything.
Everything. Explore drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, radiation, electroshock. You name it. They partnered with universities, hospitals, even prisons, all under the guise of legitimate research, using these front organizations.
And the network of institutions they co-opted is just staggering. We're talking about grants given to researchers at places like Harvard, Columbia, and Stanford. These academics were conducting CIA-funded research, often without knowing who was really paying the bills. The project's tentacles reached into every corner of the scientific establishment. So nobody knew the CIA was behind it?
That level of secrecy is a breeding ground for abuse. When no one is watching, when there are no ethical guardrails, the worst impulses can be given free rein. And that's exactly what happened. The project became a playground for scientists who wanted to conduct extreme experiments without consequences. Almost nobody. The secrecy was insane. They called it compartmentalization. Most people at the CIA didn't even know the full scope. It allowed these researchers to go completely rogue, testing incredibly dangerous stuff on people who had no idea they were guinea pigs, all in the name of national security.
Gottlieb wasn't just a chemist. He was also a farmer who was into folk dancing and mysticism. He was a complex, contradictory figure. He would go home and live this peaceful, almost bucolic life, and then go to work and oversee projects that involved extreme psychological torture. It's a level of compartmentalization that is itself a psychological puzzle. Okay, so let's talk about this Gottlieb guy. You said he was a chemist?
Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. He gets called the CIA's poisoner-in-chief, which tells you a lot. He was absolutely obsessed with one drug in particular, LSD. LSD was the silver bullet, they thought, a wonder drug that could be a truth serum, a brainwashing agent, a tool for creating amnesia, or even an incapacitating agent to be used on enemy leaders. They explored every possibility with a reckless disregard for the drug's incredible power and unpredictability.
Wow. He thought LSD was the key to mind control? The early experiments were almost comically unscientific. They would give LSD to their own agents, often without their full knowledge of the dosage or the purpose, just to see what would happen. There are reports of CIA offices in the 1950s where people were having these wild, unpredictable acid trips in a work environment. It's a recipe for disaster.
He did. He believed it could shatter the human psyche, leaving it open to be reprogrammed. The CIA bought so much of it, they became one of the biggest buyers of LSD in the world in the 50s. And then they took it outside the agency. They started dosing people from all walks of life, trying to find patterns, trying to find a way to control the uncontrollable. They were searching for a magic key that would unlock the human mind, and they were willing to destroy countless minds in the process.
That is wild. Who were they testing it on?
The sheer arrogance of it is what's so striking. The belief that they could not only understand, but also weaponize the most complex thing in the known universe, the human consciousness. They saw it as just another battlefield, another domain to be conquered and controlled. It's a level of hubris that is truly staggering. Anyone they could get their hands on, it seems. Soldiers, prisoners, psychiatric patients, and here's the kicker, sometimes just random people. Unwitting subjects. They dosed entire military units just to see what would happen. In one case, they tested LSD on patients at a psychiatric hospital in Kentucky. These were people who were already suffering from severe mental illness, and the CIA's researchers, under the guise of medical treatment, gave them powerful hallucinogens, sometimes for months on end. The goal was to see if they could create a model psychosis to study. It was a descent into madness sanctioned by the state.
Oh my God, just to see? Like, would the chain of command break down? The results were exactly what you'd expect. Chaos. Some people had terrifying, nightmarish experiences that left them more traumatized than before. Others became completely detached from reality. The idea that you could get reliable, controllable results from a drug like LSD, especially in a high-stakes interrogation, was a fantasy. But it was a fantasy they pursued for years.
Yep. They were also hoping it might be a truth serum for interrogations. But the results were, well, chaotic. People became violent, paranoid. Some were traumatized for life. Which brings us to the case of Frank Olson. Olson was a brilliant scientist specializing in biological warfare. He was deeply embedded in the CIA's darkest secrets. Some researchers believe that he wasn't just dosed with LSD as a random experiment, but that he had developed moral qualms about his work and was considering leaving the agency. His death in this context looks less like a tragic accident and more like a silencing.
I've heard that name. He worked for the CIA, right? His family's fight for the truth is a story in itself. For years, they accepted the official story of a work-related psychological breakdown. But as more information about MK Ultra came to light, they began to question everything. In the 1990s, they had his body exhumed for a second autopsy, which revealed evidence of a blow to the head before the fall. It pointed towards a struggle, towards homicide.
He did, a biochemist. In 1953, he's at a CIA retreat with some colleagues, including Gottlieb. Someone, likely Gottlieb, slips LSD into his drink. No warning, no consent. The story the CIA told his family was a lie. They were told he had a nervous breakdown with no mention of the LSD. It was a cover-up from the very beginning. The Olson case is a microcosm of the entire MK Ultra program: secrecy, lies, and a complete disregard for the human cost of their experiments.
And he had no idea what was happening to him. And for what? The program was a failure. They never found their magic mind control drug. All they did was destroy lives and leave a legacy of paranoia and distrust. Frank Olson's death was not just a tragedy, it was a murder at the hands of the state, and a crime that has never seen justice.
None. He has a complete psychological breakdown over the next few days. He's terrified, paranoid. The CIA sends him to New York to see a doctor they picked. And then 9 days after being dosed, he falls to his death from his 10th floor hotel room window. The official story is that he jumped, but the evidence, from the second autopsy to the inconsistencies in the CIA's own accounts, suggests that he was thrown from that window. He knew too much, and in the paranoid world of the Cold War, that made him a liability. His death serves as a chilling reminder that the program's victims weren't just random citizens. Sometimes they were the CIA's own.
Falls? Or was he pushed? The depravity of Operation Midnight Climax is hard to overstate. It was a program that combined sexual exploitation with psychological experimentation. The men who were lured to these safe houses were not enemy agents. They were ordinary American citizens, targeted for their perceived vulnerability. The CIA was preying on its own people.
That is the question that's haunted his family for decades. The official story was suicide, but the circumstances are just so suspicious. It became one of the first major cracks in the MK Ultra cover-up. The man in charge of the San Francisco safe house was a federal narcotics agent named George Hunter White. He was a character straight out of a noir novel, a tough, hard-drinking cop who seemed to revel in the sordid nature of his work. He would sit behind the two-way mirror, sipping a martini, and watch the acid trips unfold, taking detailed notes on the subject's behavior.
As if that wasn't bad enough, it gets even more depraved. And it wasn't just about LSD. They also experimented with other drugs and with sexual blackmail. They would photograph the men in compromising positions to see if they could be coerced into revealing secrets. It was a perfect fusion of the CIA's two great obsessions, mind control and blackmail.
It does. There was a sub-project called Operation Midnight Climax. The project ran for years, a secret, government-funded peep show. The amount of data they collected must have been enormous. But what did they learn? That people on LSD are unpredictable? That you can blackmail people with photographic evidence? It was a colossal waste of resources and a moral stain on the agency.
I'm almost afraid to ask. And what about the women they hired? They were participants, yes, but they were also being exploited. They were being paid to participate in a dangerous and unethical experiment, one where the outcomes were completely unknown. They were just as much guinea pigs as the men they brought back to the safe houses.
You should be. The CIA set up these safe houses in San Francisco and New York. They were decorated like, apartments, but they were wired for sound, with one-way mirrors in the bedrooms. The project was a perfect example of the ends justify the means mentality that pervaded the CIA during the Cold War. The threat of communism was so great in their eyes that any action, no matter how immoral, was justified in the name of national security. It's a dangerous path to go down, and it led them to some very dark places.
Okay, this is already sounding bad. And it's not just the prostitutes. The CIA actively sought out and exploited the most marginalized members of society. They saw them as human lab rats, people whose lives and well-being were disposable. It's a level of institutional cruelty that is hard to fathom.
They hired prostitutes, put them on the CIA payroll, and their job was to lure men back to these apartments. Once there, the men would be dosed with LSD, slipped into their drinks, completely without their knowledge. The experiments at the narcotics farm were particularly cruel. These were people who were already struggling with addiction, and the CIA's researchers used their addiction as leverage. They were offered a choice: participate in our dangerous and terrifying drug experiments, or go without the heroin your body is screaming for. It's a choice that is no choice at all.
And the agents just watched from behind the glass. The fact that these experiments were happening in a facility that was supposed to be helping people overcome addiction is a bitter irony. It was a place of healing turned into a laboratory of despair. And because the subjects were addicts, their accounts of what happened to them were easily dismissed. They were considered unreliable witnesses.
They watched, they took notes, they recorded everything. The official goal was to study how LSD could be used to lower inhibitions for blackmail or recruitment. The cover-up was almost as extensive as the project itself. When the order came down to destroy the files, it was a race against time. Agency employees spent days burning and shredding documents, trying to erase every trace of MKUltra's existence. They knew that if the full extent of the program ever came to light, the scandal would be enormous.
But that's just using people as toys. It's monstrous. But they missed some. A small number of financial records were accidentally sent to the wrong department and survived the purge. And those records, as dry and bureaucratic as they were, contained the first clues. They listed payments to doctors and researchers, front organizations, and universities. They were the breadcrumbs that investigators would follow to uncover the truth.
It shows you who they saw as disposable. Sex workers, drug addicts, prisoners, the mentally ill. These were their primary test subjects. At the Lexington narcotics farm in Kentucky, they literally gave addicted prisoners experimental hallucinogens in exchange for a fix of their drug of choice, like heroin. The church committee hearings were a landmark moment in American history. For the first time, the public got a glimpse into the secret world of the intelligence agencies. The testimony was shocking. People heard directly from the victims, from the families of those who had been driven to suicide, from the agents who had participated in the experiments. It was a national reckoning.
And that's coercion, plain and simple. They weren't really consenting. They were being exploited at their most vulnerable. And yet, no one ever went to jail for what happened. Sidney Gottlieb, the man at the heart of the program, was granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. He retired to a farm in Virginia and lived a quiet life. The agents who ran the safe houses, the doctors who conducted the experiments, they all faded back into obscurity. There was no accountability.
Right, and you can only keep something this dark hidden for so long. By the late 60s, even people inside the CIA were getting nervous. The project was becoming a liability. The legacy of MKUltra is not just about the specific experiments, it's about the erosion of trust between the American people and their government. The revelation that the CIA was willing to go to such lengths to violate the most basic human rights of its own citizens created a wound that has never fully healed. It's the original sin of the modern intelligence community.
So they tried to cover it up. And it's a legacy that continues to shape our culture. Every time you see a movie about a brainwashed assassin or a TV show about a secret government conspiracy, you're seeing the shadow of MKUltra. It has become part of our collective unconscious, a symbol of the dark side of power.
Big time. In 1973, right in the middle of the Watergate scandal, the outgoing CIA director, Richard Helms, gave a direct order: destroy the MKUltra files, burn everything. The surviving documents are a chilling read. They're written in this cold, detached, bureaucratic language, but they describe acts of incredible cruelty, memos about the effects of various drugs on interrogation, reports from the safe houses, requests for more funding for unconventional research. It's the banality of evil captured on paper.
He was trying to erase it from history. Did it work? And because of the destroyed files, we'll never know the full extent of the program. How many people were dosed with LSD without their consent? How many lives were ruined? How many deaths can be attributed to MKUltra? The truth is buried in ashes, and all we're left with are questions.
Almost. They destroyed most of it, but some documents survived, misfiled or overlooked, and that was enough. By 1975, journalists and whistleblowers started breaking the story open. The Church Committee was a genuine attempt to rein in the intelligence agencies. It led to new laws and regulations designed to prevent something like MKUltra from ever happening again. But you have to wonder, in the decades since, with new threats and new technologies, have those lessons been forgotten?
And this led to the Church Committee, right?
That's the million-dollar question. The world is a very different place than it was in the 1970s. We're facing new and more complex threats, from international terrorism to cyber warfare. The temptation to bend the rules, to operate in the shadows, is always going to be there.
Exactly. Senator Frank Church led these huge congressional hearings investigating abuses by intelligence agencies. They dragged MKUltra out into the light. Victims testified. Families like Frank Olson's shared their stories of psychological damage that never healed. The story of MKUltra is a powerful reminder that the greatest threat to a democracy can sometimes come from within. It's the story of how a secret, unaccountable power can turn against the very people it's supposed to protect. And it's a story that we forget at our peril.
The public must have been horrified. To hear that your own government was doing this to its citizens? It's a story of good intentions, twisted into something monstrous by paranoia and fear. The people who started MKUltra thought they were saving the world, but they ended up creating a nightmare. And it's a nightmare that we're still trying to wake up from.
It was a massive shock. It raised this fundamental question. How far is too far? Can a democracy justify this kind of secret, unethical behavior, even for national security? The CIA promised they'd clean up their act, but the damage was done. And because of those destroyed files, we still don't know the full story. The official story is that the program was terminated, but the knowledge they gained, the techniques they developed, where did all that go? Did it just disappear, Or was it folded into other, even more secret programs? That's the question that keeps conspiracy theorists up at night.
Which leads right into the legacy of all this. It's like this two-headed monster, isn't it? There's the stuff we know happened, and then there's all the stuff we can only guess at. And it's not just the stuff of internet forums. There are serious researchers and journalists who believe that the legacy of MKUltra can be seen in the interrogation techniques used at places like Guantanamo Bay. The sensory deprivation, the sleep deprivation, the use of drugs, these are all techniques that were pioneered in the MKUltra era.
Perfectly put. The first head is the documented reality, the survivors. People left with lifelong trauma, PTSD, addiction issues. Their trust in everything was shattered. And families who spent decades fighting for the truth. The program also had a strange, unintentional impact on American culture. The CIA's experiments with LSD are a part of the origin story of the 1960s counterculture. People like Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, were first introduced to LSD as volunteers in CIA-sponsored drug experiments. It's a bizarre twist of history.
And the second head is the conspiracy theories. So in a way, the CIA's attempt to control the mind ended up helping to unleash a movement that was all about freeing the mind. The irony is almost too perfect, but it doesn't absolve them of the damage they caused. For every person who had a consciousness-expanding experience, there were countless others who were left shattered.
Yep, because when you burn the files, you create a vacuum, and that vacuum gets filled with speculation. Did the program really end, or did it just get a new name and go deeper underground? The story of MKUltra is a tangled web of science and espionage and morality. It's a story with no easy answers and no happy ending. It's a dark chapter in American history, but one that we have to confront if we want to understand the world we live in today. People wonder if the interrogation techniques used later, like in the War on Terror, were influenced by what they learned in MKUltra. It's a story that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the nature of power and the price of security. How much freedom are we willing to sacrifice in the name of safety? And who gets to make that decision? These are the questions that MKUltra forces us to confront.
Or if psychological warfare, even media portrayals of brainwashing, have roots in this program. We know MKUltra was real. The declassified documents prove it. But those missing files, they're a blank space where our worst fears can live. A secret war, fought not on battlefields, but in the hidden recesses of the human mind. A war whose casualties were not soldiers, but ordinary citizens. And a war whose full story may never be known. That is the legacy of Project MKUltra.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale. The scandal just permanently broke a certain level of public trust in the government, and it's a chilling reminder of what can happen when power operates without any oversight, in total secrecy. And it's a legacy that serves as a constant reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. The moment we decide that the ends justify the means, we are on a slippery slope to the kinds of abuses that defined MKUltra. It's a lesson that every generation has to learn for itself.
A blank check, a poisoner in chief, and a complete disregard for human life. That was Project MKUltra, a secret war for the mind waged on its own citizens.
It's a story that serves as a vital warning about secrecy and power. The questions it raises are just as relevant today as they were in the 1970s.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Redacted Frequencies. Join us next time when we look into something a little more current, but maybe just as unsettling: how social media is quietly rewiring your brain.
Ooh, that's a good one. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories they'd rather remain hidden. It really helps us with getting these stories out there. Thanks for listening.